for showing up for the session. I am excited to have this rare privilege of leading such an impactful session, hopefully for people that are aspiring to take on this challenge and for people that are just interested in knowing more about this event. So, like Christine rightly introduced me, I am Michael Mensah, and I'm working with Dr. Kerry Finley in the Department of Biology here at the University of Regina. And in the year 2014 was a real highlight. And I took up this challenge and was able to go all the way from the local event to the North American event where I represent Canada as the North American finalist. So that was a real highlight. And I'm excited to share my experience with you all. So, okay, there you go. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, right. Sure. For this session, I will be touching on four key areas. So I'm going to introduce 3MT and how challenging it is, and also reiterate some of the rules that most of you would have already seen by now. I would also touch on how to write a winning script, so turning your thesis into a 3-minute story. Um, you might be wondering, this session is for developing slides that support your story. Why then am I touching on script? So the idea of 3MT is sort of counterintuitive to what we do mostly as academics. So as academics, when we have a talk, we would mostly prepare our slides and then later think of what to say for each slide that shows up. But 3MT really works in this counterintuitive way that you need to really write your script. And then based on whatever you have in your script, design a slide that complements it. So it works perfectly that way, and I will share my experience. I'll also hone in later into how to design a slide that supports your message. And to wrap it all up, I will share some of my experiences and the benefits that I got to enjoy from participating in this event. So what is 3MT? So the idea of 3MT actually was born in the state of Queensland, and it was during a time that this community was suffering a severe drought. And by way of conserving water, community members were encouraged to install 3-minute egg timers in their bathrooms. So as a way of providing a check and helping them conserve the little water that they had. So during this period, the Dean of Grad School of the University of Queensland, by name Emeritus Professor Alan Lawson, put two and two together, and then the idea of 3MT was born. It was first designed for PhD candidates who were challenged to share their voluminous work of research in just 3 minutes. But over the years, it has evolved, and now master students are able to also participate in this event. Currently, data has it that it is being held annually in over 900 universities across 85 countries worldwide. So it's an event that has really gained traction over the past few years, and it is one that is projected to continue to grow. Now, what makes 3MT so challenging? Okay, so I have projected some data. So a typical PhD thesis would have between 40,000 to 80,000 words. And a master's thesis would typically have between 20,000 to 40,000 words. And 3MT is really challenging us to really condense this into a 3-minute speech. And this is incredibly challenging on a lot of levels, and I've highlighted a few of them. First, technical jargon. As academics, we have terms that allow us to easily communicate among our peers, right? So right from when you start with your research and when you've had the opportunity to present before, you likely presented to an audience that is in your field. So the use of terms is one that we get so used to very early on in our studies, right? Now, when you take on the 3MP challenge, you take on a different sort of, you find yourself in a different set of context where you are presenting to a larger audience, a general one, of course, who may not necessarily appreciate the technical terms that you use. So you are challenged to break these terms down into simple everyday language. And it can be challenging to us sometimes because, at times there's the feeling that am I watering down my research and my concept? So that's where the real challenge is. So you need to think about how to break it down without losing meaning. Um, again, we have complex concepts that we try to understand in our research project. Sometimes we require several paragraphs to break down an idea and to set the stage so we're able to build on argument. Here in 3MT, you're expected to sort of break down these same concepts that you may require pages or several paragraphs to explain, but you're expected to only do it in a space of 180 seconds. And it is you highlighting a number of things. So it's incredibly challenging how we're able to achieve this. Again, we work with large data sets. Those of us in the sciences work with large data sets. You have found so many interesting results that you would like to touch on, but 3MP is really challenging you to really find a core message. Okay. So I've highlighted these three reasons, and there are a host of others. Not to talk of, public presentation and, presenting before an audience, the tension that come with complementing your speech with gestures and all of that. So in conclusion to everything here, when I took on this challenge, I found it incredibly challenging. And the idea of condensing this work that I have invested so much time and energy into 180 seconds was incredibly challenging yet exciting, and we'll get to it. So I would like to remind us of the 3MT rules that we all know of. So like any competition or contest, there are rules that guide it. 3MT has quite a bit of it. I have highlighted these three main areas as it fits in the context of what I'll be discussing. So for the slide requirement, 3MT only allows you one static PowerPoint slide, okay? And this should have an aspect ratio of 16:9. You are not allowed to have any sort of transitions, animations, or movement in the slide, okay? And this is challenging because in most academic conferences, we animate figures so as to drive home certain important points. 3MT denies you of all that privilege. Again, with media and props, there are no additional sound or video files that you could include. So it is just one static slide. Again, for the presentation guidelines, as if, condensing your research isn't enough, you have a time limit and you are not expected to exceed 3 minutes. You do that and it's an automatic disqualification. So you want to be on time, and then you are presenting in regular prose, okay? So I know people are very talented and are able to, come up with some spoken word performances, which is very captivating and all of that. 3MT denies you of that. You can't present it in a song or raps whatsoever. You have to talk as a normal person would. So yeah, that's a few of the rules that you need to be mindful of. Now, so personally, I went through all of these rules and all of that, and I'm like, okay, I will still take on this challenge because I'm intrigued by the idea of 3MT. So what I decided to do is then to think of how I could come up with a winning script. Okay. So knowing all the rules that govern the competition, I decided to categorize my scripts in three broad sections. Okay. Winning a 3MT starts with, coming up with a captivating script, a compelling script to tell your story. So what I found was that three broad areas were particularly important and needed to be clearly communicated in your presentation. So the first of these was the problem and why you think it's a problem. So what is really wrong? What is wrong in the society or field you find yourself? And why should anyone in the audience listening care about that? Okay. So make sure that that has been clearly communicated in your script. Also, you would have to highlight what it is that you are doing to address the identified problem. So yes, you have identified the problem. What approach are you employing to address the situation? And lastly, but not the less important, and I find it's really important. Okay. So this is what judges are really scoring on. Aside every other thing that we are going to talk about, what is the impact your work is going to have? What is the wider impact? Why does your work matter? Okay. So make sure that these broad categories have been clearly communicated in your presentation. Um, so having established all of this, there is still another number of steps that I personally employ to arrive at getting the script that I eventually had. Okay. So how do I write a winning 3MT script? That was the question I kept asking myself. Uh, and after digging into what people have done and what has been recommended, I sort of arrived at something as logical as has been presented. So in the 3MT event, like I mentioned, you only have 3 minutes. You don't want to be developing three ideas in 3 minutes. It would be confusing to your audience. You want to focus on one core message. So the challenge really is to think about your research and come up with one core message. And how do you do this? You can commit lots of time into doing it, definitely. But also it's very helpful, as I found it, talking to people, talking to lab colleagues, talking to friends, talking to family. This is what I'm working on. I think this is my core message. What you make of it? Okay, yeah, I agree. Okay, you talked about your project, and I saw you were focusing on something that I don't quite see you talk. So it's really about honing in, committing time, and identifying a core message for your research. And that is what you script your talk all around. Um, you need to have an attention grabbing hook. So you start talking and you should get the attention of your audience. Okay. You should start with a phrase, a sentence that gets everyone wondering, hey, what's next? What's next to come? So you need to have a hook and you really need to tell a story. Okay. Our minds are wired to remember interesting stories. Okay. So you are conducting this amazing research, yes, but you need to present this in a way as to telling a whole story, okay? Get the pieces together and tell a story. And by doing it, you need to leverage on the use of analogies, um, humor, and also character. Okay, analogies in the sense that you may be working on something very abstract, especially for those of us in the sciences. Maybe physics, you are working with particles and all of that. It sounds abstract to a general audience. Okay, how can they relate to what you are working on? That's where the use of analogies become very important. Let people think of your project in ways that they would normally do in their daily lives. Okay, so use analogies. Also, like I highlighted before, eliminate technical jargon. They don't do a lot of help. And before you wrap it all up, you need to come full circle. They've been listening to you for 3 minutes, right? You started somewhere, you built a story and all of that. Before you wrap it all up, leave them with a take-home message, take them back to where it all started and where you are finishing, and leave them a lasting impression. So that, winning a 3MT requires you leaving a lasting impression on your audience and the judges' perception, okay? So you want to make sure that this is very well done. So now I will hone into how I went about using all these steps. Okay. So I am working on a very interesting project, right? I am working on identifying what we call drivers and controls of salinization in prairie ponds and that. So basically, I am looking into why the sloughs here in the prairies get salty over time and how we could work to help to keep them fresh. Okay, because salty water is unsuitable for cattle use, and it has so many devastating impacts on their well-being when they take it, right? So thinking through the broader context, and I always say that stay at the 1,000 feet level, don't get caught up in the weeds. Okay, think of sitting in an airplane and coming to Regina while you are flying high above. You look down, and if you are fortunate and the clouds are not thick, you are likely going to see roads. You will likely see tiny elements moving like cars. You definitely wouldn't know whether it's a Toyota, a Chevy, or whatever. So stay at that level, okay? Don't get into the weeds because you don't have the luxury of time to do all of that. Okay. So I thought the big idea of my project was what I have written. So high salt concentration in these ponds threaten cow well-being, and by identifying what causes these high salt levels and testing plant-based and sediment removal solutions, we had the chance of keeping these water fresh and these cows healthy and happy. So yeah, having this core message, I scripted my talk thereafter. Now I talk about creating an attention grabbing hook. These come in several forms, right? They could be relatable questions, okay? So I start in contests where a lady walks up the stage and goes like, show by hand if you've ever taken an antibiotic. And without thinking about it, you see the crowd all going like that, right? So it's a very relatable question. Make sure you have a relatable question that will grab the attention of people. So people respond like that, and thereafter they are interested in knowing what follows. So use an attention grabbing hook. It can be a vivid scenario. Okay. Now imagine doing that. Imagine doing that. And, these are scenarios that people would typically do on a daily or once in a while, and they can relate and would be interested in where you go from there. The attention grabbing hook could also be a surprising fact. You say something, oh, really, that is happening? Um, yeah, so just have something about your research or the problem you are looking into that you could create a hook uh, along these lines, okay? And I'll give an example how I used it. So in my very first script, this is how I started. I started with my presentation. So I went like, what do we do as humans when we are thirsty or feel dehydrated? We find something refreshing to drink. So I asked that question and I pause a little and allow people to, take it in. Okay, when we are thirsty, we, definitely find a drink and all of that. So people are answering the question in their head. Then I come up with it. Okay. Now I follow again with another question. Now, what do cows like these do when they feel the same? Okay. It gets them thinking again. And then I make them understand they also try to find something refreshing to drink. Now, over here, I want to highlight something very important. So my script is, what do crowds like these do? And at that point, I was pointing to my slide. And it's important for a lot of reasons. So I talk about, creating your script and then later creating your slide, okay? One thing, and I'm not talking about how to present and all of that, but I'll chip this in. It's important to at least refer to your slide at some point. So your 3MC slide is not just in the background for nothing. Okay, you have a question? Okay. Oh, really? Okay, I was wondering the same thing. Okay. There are other online. Yeah. So you look at it. Yeah. 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 Because I have within presentations that refer to their slides. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. So that is not a rule that I have come across. And, maybe I haven't studied hard enough, but there's not a rule that requires you. There's not a rule that requires you to point to it. There is not a rule that refuses or desists you from doing that. From experience, you are giving a talk. You have a slide projected, okay? It is complementing your talk. I feel it is only right that at some point, while you want them to have their focus on you, like your slide shouldn't distract your audience, but it is not there for decoration. It is complementing your talk, right? So you give your talk. Where does this drive home any point? Okay. So I feel like at some point it is useful for you to point them to it, have a glance. If you haven't seen it all this while, this is what is depicting all the theory that I'm sharing. So Mhm. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Exactly. So yeah. Yeah. So we'll get to that. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for causing me and have this is an important discussion. I'm really glad that we're on the same level now. Yeah. Yeah. So so I had this relatable questions that I tried to hook my audience with from the start. Moving on from there, I came in with a vivid scenario. Okay. Now imagine being thirsty and feeling so dehydrated from a hike in the sun, only to be served a glass of ocean water, making you even thirstier and more dehydrated. Okay, so I am still hooking them with this vivid scenario. So you are not limited to just using one of these attention grabbing hooks. You can leverage on relatable questions, vivid scenarios, surprising facts, and there is more. These are the three broad categories that I wanted to highlight for this talk. Now comes one of the most important things that I find in 3MC. Okay, tell a clear story. Let people leave the room having an idea what your talk was about. Okay, because that will win you the judges' vote, and that would win you the audience's vote. Okay, they should have an idea what this guy talked about. Okay, and you can do this by leveraging on the use of analogy, as earlier mentioned, humor, okay? Humor, and I'll get to that, and using characters. People come up, there is a boy named, they mention a name, they create a character in the mental image of their audience and tell a story about that character. So try to tell a story and strategically weave it with all of these important components, okay? Um, yes, the analogies that I have highlighted in the previous one. And then, so I talk about that and I go, okay, I'll do that again. So now imagine being thirsty and feeling so dehydrated from a hike in the sun, only to be served a glass of salty ocean water, making you even thirstier and more dehydrated. Now, this is the unfortunate situation of many cows in the prairie every dry summer. In 2017, over 200 cows died because the ponds they drank from had salt content that was at the time higher than the ocean. Aside from the $300,000 financial loss, farmers reported they had to deal with what felt like losing their family. So here I am telling a story of an event that happened, okay, that drives home the point of why my research is relevant, okay? So make sure that you are strategically weaving your project around a relevant story. You know, it can be a fictional one, especially for people that are, I know lots of psychology students do that, and I think so a few social science presentations I've listened to do that, and even in the sciences people do that. But it can also be a real story that happened, like in my case, that you read your story around. Okay, so make sure that you are telling a story. Um, and then I mentioned the need to bring it all together in the end. You tie it all in nicely, okay? In the end, when you are wrapping it all up, you want to remind your audience what you started talking about and where you have left them, okay? Leave them with a take home message, okay? So in my case, this is how I had spoken about what the problem was, what it was that I was doing to address the situation, what the impact of my work is gonna be, and to wrap it all up, I make them understand that we are definitely going to advance knowledge in this field, and with such an understanding, and I go like such an understanding is valuable for keeping pond water fresh and start cows happy to continue serving us with the freshest beef and the most refreshing milk drink. So here I had a little bit of humor, wrapping it all up and then taking them back to salty ponds and why sad cows needed to be kept happy and healthy. And so make sure that in the end, you come full circle, okay? Come full circle and leave them with a lasting impression of how important your work is. Um, and while you do all of these should all be structured for time and flow. Okay. Like I talked about the three broad categories, like you talk about problems and you move on to what you are doing. It is great. And I wanted to mention this earlier. You can include results, and I think they do a good job driving home your points on several levels. But especially for new grad students or grad students that probably had to change topics and all of that, uh, the lack of results shouldn't discourage you from taking on this challenge. You can give an amazing presentation without any explicit claims on results being made. So do not be discouraged if you are still in introductory phases and have an idea what you are working on. You can still take on this challenge and give a winning presentation. Now, Sure. Right, 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 right. Yeah, 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 yeah. 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 No? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's really important. One message and one takeaway I got from 3MT was what you were saying was as important as how you were saying it. Okay. So, yeah, and this all, stage presence and all of that, I think has already been covered. So, yeah, but yeah, you needed to read your script and as it were, use your body to also communicate the importance of your work and all of that. So, yeah, it's important to set some of these things in. Maybe on a regular, if I was having a conversation, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be as, demonstrative, but yeah, it's really important for 3MC that you do that. Yeah. Um, with the word count and how much words you should have to be able to pace yourself rightly and all of that. So preparing for this, I went back to the scripts that I used, and this was how it transitioned over the period. So at the U of R, I think I have about 374 words. It did a great job because they earned me a spot in the final. But from there, I think I decided it needed to be revised and it went up quite a bit. And I presented at the U of R finale, and I had a script of about 409 words. Um, at the regionals, though, it dropped a little, 403. Um, and I think I tried to figure out why it changed. To be fair, I struggled to find why myself. But what one thing I do know is after my kids, I got some feedback, and based on that, I thought I needed to include some more detail. However, as I advanced in my research, like from the regionals to the national, you see a significant drop, right? Um, just because I think I did fairly well with pacing for the U of L finale and the regionals event. But I thought at the national, I needed to cut down words to slow down a little and to enunciate more appropriately. Um, and it's really dependent on, how fast you're able to talk and all of that. But one understanding I got was for the 3MT event, you have 3 minutes to communicate to an audience. There's not a lot of time for them to process a lot of information. And one thing about 3MT is there are certain points you make that requires you allowing your audience to sit with for a moment before you throw another point at them. So as I advanced, I thought I could do away with some of the content that I had. And one of the things I cut down was the relatable question I had at the start. What do we do as humans and all of that? I cut that out. I thought I could do that without losing lots of meaning because there was another hook with the imagine being thirsty. So that's the hook that I use at the national level and the North American level. I think I did that and didn't quite lose a lot of meaning and it worked well for me. And I thought I was able to pace myself very well. And, I allowed my audience to take in the information I was given without rushing them. And that's what I believe they appreciated. So, in my experience, I suggest keeping your works between 350 and 420. Okay. I think within this, you can pace yourself. You would be able to put in sufficient details to communicate your research as expected of you. So anything beyond 4:30, uh, and like I said, it depends on, who you are and how well you're able to enunciate within a quick space. And, anything beyond 4:20, you have to be very well rehearsed. And one thing you should recognize is that the 3MT is time bound. You don't have a lot of room to mumble. So, the more works you have, the lesser your chances of going off on your script at any point. In my experience at the U of R finale, at one point I sort of blanked for a moment and I had to find myself back into it. And I believe if I had a lot more content to cover, I probably could have exceeded the limit. So it is not impossible for that to happen. But then once you are very well rehearsed, chances of that happening is significantly lower. And yeah, as I advanced, I didn't experience any of that. So if you believe you are very well rehearsed, then you really want to keep the content, okay. But yeah, in my experience, I would recommend that keeping it within this world. Now, to why we all probably signed up for this. Oh my God, that's a lot of time to set the stage. Okay, so one rule is always remember that your slide complements your script, okay? Um, Show something. That's why I find it important that at some point them to this, let them know that this is not there for showing alone. It is complementing the story that I'm telling you. So make sure that it is complementing your script. Again, like we did for writing your script, focus on one central idea. Yeah, that idea with which you wrote your script, work with that also when creating your slide. Okay? Work with that. Again, avoid complex or boring graphs. Okay. I mean, this is a beautiful graph to have in your manuscript, right? But it's 3MT. Okay. Um, I was reading this. The brain is, this has text and all of that, and the brain will process just pictures, about 60,000 times more quickly than a word text. Now you look at this and you have to process, okay, grains are making about 30%. It's hard, right? It's hard to really make out these details as an instant. How about you presenting it this way? Okay. Uh, this is very intuitive, very easy to understand at a glance. So rather than presenting something like this, you go to something like that, that's again, interesting data and all of that, but you look at it, okay, Australia, you are picturing where Australia is, where's Russia, where's the United States. How about you go from that to this? Okay, so maximize the use of images and figures. That's really important. Yeah, 3MT is not where you go show what you have figures and the magnificent tables you've made in your thesis and all of that. Show them a picture that they can easily understand and make sense of. um, Keep your slides conceptual. I think one competitor brilliantly depicted this. So Nada El Amadi, she was a Western regional finalist. She made it to the national finals as well. And she and myself represented Canada at the North American event. I think she depicted the idea of conceptualizing brilliantly. Like over here, her research was really looking into how a technology could be used to develop antibiotics that are able to fight toxins that hide in very tight spaces in the gut. And she demonstrated this by talking about what the problem is, what the current treatments were, and what her project was really focusing on, and I think she had demonstrated the idea of keeping it conceptualized brilliantly. Um, in my own situation, when I sort of conceptualizing my research, like this is this is one of my favorite slides in my thesis. Like when I took up the challenge and I wanted to show a conceptual image of what I'm doing, like this is an image that I would typically use to set the stage when I am talking to experts in my field. And even with this image, if I'm using it in a PowerPoint slide, I present them in animation. I don't throw it all at once. Every labeling you see come in as and when I talk about them. 3MT doesn't give me the luxury to do that. So I soon realized that no, this can't be used. Okay. And aside from the complexity in understanding it, you look at it and what do you see? Jargon. Like jargon. So there was no way this was going to be appropriate for a 3MT competition. Okay. Um, Based on my core message, I later on came up with something like this, which I think worked quite okay for my sheets because I was still learning at that stage. I think I used something like this for my sheets, but I soon realized that less is more, right? Like over here, there's too much text. Like there's too much text, and my audience will try to read everything there and I will lose them for a moment. And so I soon realized that was more. Okay. Um, and at the U of R finals, this was really the slide I used. Okay. So I used this and I talked about humor, right? Over here, I tried to use this call out. So there is a cow, having this style thoughts and something to give, the audience a giggle, right? So, yeah, the use of humor and all of that. So, like I said, this is complementing your talk. I talk about sad cows being happy. So, yeah, the audience could relate their talk to what I had projected. So this is what I use. So with my understanding that less is more, but it still evolved, and I'll come to that. Um, yes, you want to use an attention catching visual. And I've been talking about visuals, and these could be images that you find online, images that you took yourself, okay, or they could be diagrams like I showed before, okay. So a perfect example of an image that perfectly summed up the project of a 3MT winner was this one. So quickly easy, the 2022 U of R 3MT winner, talking about decolonizing child welfare, used this image that brilliantly depicted the point he was driving home, the app that allowed indigenous people to really be uh, at the helm of affairs of taking care of their own. So in his instance, this worked perfectly. So he got this image of the internet, didn't have to go through PowerPoint to create anything, and this perfectly complemented his talk. So it could be an image you get off the internet. It could be something that you create yourself. And there are tools for doing this. I think I use PowerPoint. I know people use what we call BioRender, Canva, Adobe products. So there are several tools you could use in coming up with an image that complements your story. Um, I personally do leverage on both, okay, image and diagrams myself. So this is an image I took myself in the field. The floating island is an image I took myself. The dredging, however, is one that I got off the internet. And yeah, so I had this and depicted what was happening with the cows and what we were trying to do to resolve the issue of high salt concentrations in ponds. I later on resorted to the previous slide I saw. They didn't have these two, but I realized that as I advanced, I kept getting feedback from the judges that they wanted to see more on my slide, and I saw it was useful to bring these two solutions back. So while I still talked about in my delivery, I think it made a lot of sense to have it that people get a mental picture of what you are talking about by looking at your slides. So this, I think, perfectly complemented whatever I talked about. So, and I think generally there's this interesting rules about threes, and yeah, I can't go into the theory now, but most of the things that we've got around a tripod and all of that, things that are presented in, threes sort of make sense to people and leave lasting impression on people. I won't get into the theory. It's something I just wanted to mention. Rule of three. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe we should look into it together. Just to remind us of what's important for coming up, developing an audience-focused slide, we talked about focusing on one central idea. We talked about avoiding complex or boring graphs and keeping it conceptual. Uh, Design it for instant understanding. People don't have to think too hard to decipher what message your slide is putting across, and also minimize how much text you have on your slide. Um, and yes, your visual should be attention catching. Now to the key experiences I had professionally. Now we are done with what I wanted to talk about, and this is just to reiterate why it's important and some of the experiences that you stand to benefit from taking on this challenge. So yeah, it came with financial rewards, right? Yeah, you win here and you are getting a cool 1,500 bucks, and so yeah, it definitely, and as grad students who are typically cash strapped, it went a long way to do a lot of good. So yeah, there's that. And, before this, I really never thought of myself as a public speaker. But yeah, definitely it was a talent that this on edge, and one that I have kept developing. Um, oh my God, the love and support from the university community was incredible. It was incredible. And I still keep receiving that. So yeah, that is something you definitely benefit from. Oh, and there's so many comments you will get. Oh my gosh. And it came with so much motivation and renewed excitement to even continue with what I was working on. Okay. Having kids as young as a dark hole one cute little kid came up to me and was, all excited, cows, and telling me mine was her favorite, and yeah, so it left a lasting impression. So yeah, it really comes with that, and had so much fun. The connection with friends traveling around was in Kelowna, Toronto, away in Saint Louis. So it was in Saint Louis. It was such an amazing time. So yeah, and these are expensive travels that, out of my pocket would have been really tough back to him to give me the opportunity to do all of that. The numerous networking opportunities and valuable social currency that came with it. So yeah, here at the U of R, I got a chance to meet and hear the research that these brilliant students were all working on, the Western regionals, all these amazing people, at the nationals, still connected with these brilliant minds. And then in the North American event. So yeah, it was a beautiful experience. Uh, and yeah, I talked about the valuable social currency, the opportunity to feature in a prestigious U of our 50th anniversary video. Uh, had a chance to, meet with the very busy president and vice president of this great institution, and have had a chance to be on academic podcasts, several radio and TV presentation opportunities. to mentor some grad students and all of that. And of course, I've had a chance to connect and share my experience with amazing people like yourself. So uh, it is worth it. It is worth it if you are thinking of taking on this challenge, and I highly recommend that you do it. Uh, and yeah, I have received lots of support along this journey. My supervisor, Dr. Karen Finley, and our entire lab group, like they had this a dozen times and, provide us very valuable feedback. So the team of members of the Trinity Aquatic Science uh, team, talk of Jess Ryan at the time, Jesse, and a whole lot others that were around at the time. Mike, Krista, Beliko, was very helpful. After the completion at the U of R, I worked with her closely. For the regional, she traveled with me to Kelowna, to Toronto, to the US. So yeah, she was very supportive. Aziz, Dr. Aziz also same, was always available and yeah, ever ready to assist with whatever. Frequency, a previous champion, 2022, and he also provided very valuable insight. My 3MC journey really started with taking a course that, oh, Dr. Melhat, she's a doctor. She's a doctor. Yeah, I learned a lot from there and built on it to get to where I got to. And my wife, Caroline Barbara, also helped. The feedback was, yeah. Oh, she is? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, she's the one I got it for. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. 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 And of course, the University of Regina and the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, like all my travels were sponsored by them. And yeah, it was a really wholesome and pleasant experience that I would do all over again. Yeah, and yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Mhm.
I just want to say so that you're but now, but people really work hard to make that North America. Otherwise, your travel opportunities will not.
Oh.
This here.
Okay.
Out your place. I love that.
Uh, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you are. Okay, sure. Thanks for coming.
What was the time? And like what happens when you then like how
Good question. Good question. Yeah, I've seen presentations where people blank out and takes a fair bit of time. Some don't even recover. I've seen some that